Hey, everybody. It's time once again for another wonderful, whimsical visit to the world of sociology, featuring yours truly, Mr. Fabulous, as your master of ceremonies. Today, we're going to be focusing on chapter 6 in sociology. So let's get to it. I'll bet you have a quote, Maynard. You would win. The existentialist Albert Camus said, "Charm is the way of getting the answer without asking a clear question." Here's something we could probably all relate to. There's an old saying that it's easier to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. Indeed. See, if you ask permission from your parents, you know they're going to say no. So you might as well just go ahead and do it and then tell them, geez, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize you wouldn't want me to do that. At least you have the experience. Got it? Well, the chapter is entitled Social Interaction in Everyday Life. But the subtitle for this chapter could just be Symbolic Interaction, because that is the focus of the symbolic interaction paradigm. Excuse me. A key point in the chapter is that human lives are guided, but never totally determined by social structure. Within certain social boundaries, we create social reality by how we interact with one another, which is, of course, the essence of the symbolic interaction paradigm. Well, for that nasty old exam, you need to know, starting on page 141, status, ascribed status, achieved status, and master status. And they're pretty simple to understand. So let's get to it. First of all, status is a social position, a social position that a person holds at a given time. It literally is from the Latin meaning the use of standing. Sociologist Melvin Tuman observed, "It is crucial that responsibilities, resources, and rights be assigned to statuses and not to particular individuals. For only by doing so can societies establish general and uniform rules or norms that will apply to many and diverse individuals who are to occupy the statuses," end quote. So his point is, let's say the status of professor or the status of president. Status is like a job description. It's not very dynamic. It's kind of dry and antiseptic, and yet it outlines exactly what is expected of a person who plays that role, that there are boundaries that that person has to fulfill the role within. Remember, too, that we simultaneously hold many statuses referred to as a status set, and that individuals gain and lose many statuses throughout their lives. Daughter, son, sibling, aunt, uncle, nephew, so forth, so on. Okay, ascribed status is a social position that is received at birth or involuntarily assumed later in life. It is assigned to individuals without reference to their innate differences or abilities. It can be predicted and trained for from the moment of birth. For example, if one is born as a prince or a princess, from that moment on, one is being trained to assume the royalty of being king or queen. Okay, and I know many of you were born as princesses. If you're born a son or a daughter, if you're born Latina or Latino, if you're born with dark skin, see, these are involuntarily assumed at birth. If you live long enough, you become a teenager. If you live longer, you become elderly. Again, it's nothing you do, it just happens. It's just ascribed to you. Now, even though these statuses are ascribed, they still must be socially constructed as relevant. So in other words, what does it mean to be a teenager in our society? What does it mean to be a millennial in our society? What does it mean to be elderly in our society? There's a social construct about all of that, even though these are statuses we gain just by happening to be born or living. Achieve status. Now let's think about that. Does that mean you actually have to do something to achieve that status? Bingo. See how easy these are to understand? Achieve status is a social position that is assumed voluntarily and that reflects a significant measure of personal ability and effort. For example, being a wife. Man, does that take effort. Being a professor. I proved it takes no effort at all. Anyone can do this job. Honors student. Hey, that takes effort. For one thing, you got to learn to suck up to the professors. Being a thief. See, well, maybe George Thorogood was right. Maybe some people are born bad to the bone, but for the most part, I don't believe that. People are just born and then they do what they do. So you have to actually do something to be a thief, as in steal. As applied to everyday life, ascribed status and achieved status are actually two endpoints on a continuum. Remember, we talked about this in the previous chapter. Continuum means two endpoints, more or less. Shades of gray, less than black and white. So for example, if you are, I'll let you think about that. Why is that true? Why are achieved status and ascribed status actually endpoints on a continuum? Think about that for a few moments. Time's up. Okay, so for example, if a person is born poor, it's possible to eventually become rich, but there are so many obstacles to overcome to achieve that status that it's going to be very difficult to do. On the other hand, if one's ascribed status is rich to begin with, born in a wealthy family, it's much easier to retain that wealth and keep that wealthy status and achieve greater wealth than if one is born poor. On another spectrum, if one is born with dark skin in America, that person is going to face many more obstacles than someone born with white skin in terms of achieved status, in terms of what they can achieve in terms of status the rest of their lives. Finally, we have master status, a status that has exceptional importance for social identity, often shaping a person's entire life. Often it involves one's occupation, and it could start off with achieved or ascribed. So don't get confused by this. Say, well, are they three separate things? No, all master statuses start out as either achieved or ascribed. So later on, they take on a life of their own. For example, if I say to you, Bill Gates, don't think, just react. What comes to your mind? Perhaps Microsoft in the old days. More recently, he's one of the richest men in the world. Who is the richest man in the world, by the way? Could it be Jeff Bezos of Amazon? Oh, yeah. He had a week not too long ago where he made, I think it was $17 billion in 1 week. 1 week. Anyway, I'll give you another example. Let's suppose a person is born, their ascribed status is a person is born with cerebral palsy and has to use a wheelchair in order to get about. Well, people will tend to think of that person as a person who is wheelchair bound, that the disability of cerebral palsy will take on the major master status of how this person is thought of or referred to. We already mentioned somebody being incredibly wealthy, that takes on its own status. I mentioned previously, having dark skin in South Africa had a unique status under apartheid and still does today. There's still Black people in South Africa still face oppression. And at another level, it's true of Black people in the United States as well. To give you an example of how far we've come, in 1988, when African-American civil rights leader Jesse Jackson ran for president, when he'd be interviewed by reporters, they would ask him, so why are you doing this? And he'd go, well, I'm running for president. They go, yeah, right, but why are you really doing this? What's your, and he'd go, you don't understand, I'm running for president. See, at that time, they couldn't take seriously the fact that a Black man was running for president. This is not surprising that when Obama was elected and he had his acceptance speech in Grant Park in Chicago, there stood Jesse Jackson crying. Why? Because he was actually next to Martin Luther King Jr. on that balcony when Martin Luther King Jr. was shot. So Jesse Jackson was right at the forefront of the original civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, and he lived to see a black man elected president. Okay, next concept is role. A role is patterns of behavior corresponding to a particular status. In fact, it's from a French word meaning a roll of paper that contains an actor's part. So, individuals occupy a status in which they perform its role. Roles are relational in that they organize our behavior towards some other person. So, for example, the role of professor can only be a role enacted in reference to a student, in relation to a student. The role of student can only be performed in relation to professor or to other students. So, all roles are relational to other people. Ralph Linton observed, quote, "A role is the dynamic expression of a status. Status and role serve to reduce the ideal patterns for social life to individual terms." Okay, so I originally said if you look at status, it's kind of like a job description. It's kind of not very dynamic. It's rather sterile looking. Here's the job description. But when you actually perform that job, when you perform the role of that job description, that status, that's what brings it to life. So for example, you have more than one professor and you can watch how each of us performs the role. Or entire political science courses are devoted to how the presidents of the United States have performed the role of president. Now, the way this works is, again, the status sets the boundaries. So I, as a professor, in this capacity, I should say, as professor, can perform the role in many ways, but I cannot exceed the job description of what is expected in terms of the duties and responsibilities of a professor. Likewise, a president, there are boundaries to what the president can and can't do. Because we frequently perform many roles attached to a single status, we could experience role conflict, which is incompatibility among roles corresponding to or more different statuses. A great example is the demands of job versus family life. We see this really emphatically during the pandemic. So here are parents who have to somehow continue to perform their jobs, perhaps at home while still taking care of their kids who can't go to school. So it's become incredibly demanding and a serious consideration for how do we open up society again, and do we have to make sure kids go back to school so that parents can perform their work roles, even though it may be risky to do so. To give you another example, the Families and Work Institute found that 25% of respondents had refused overtime because it conflicted with family. 24 refused travel for family reasons, and 19% refused relocations, and 10% even refused promotions because it would conflict with family life. Okay, what else do we got here? The social construction of reality. Symbolic interactionists believe that society is nothing more than the behavior of countless people. The social construction of reality is the process by which individuals creatively shape reality through social interaction. It's a process of negotiating reality to attempt to define a social situation. Okay, Walter Lippmann observed, quote, "We do not first see, then define. We define first, then we see. The facts we see depend on where we are placed and the habits of our eyes." Well, let's wade again into the wonderful world of Maynard. or put another way, the world according to Maynard. Now, by the way, I always point this out so that you realize, hey, it's just my opinion. You don't have to agree. And, over the years, I've actually written several books. They're just in my mind, and I haven't published them yet. So the first one is, of course, The World According to Maynard. Then the second one in the trilogy, the second one is going to be Maynard Says, S-E-Z, like exclamation point, Maynard Says. And then the third one is actually going to be an app. It started out as a book, but now it's going to be an app so that people can put it on their mobile phone. And it's going to be, what would Maynard do in this situation? Now, my thinking on this is people around the world are confronted with difficult situations and they don't know what the hell to do. So they're thinking, I don't know what to do. What would Maynard do in this situation? Simple, just consult the app and I'll tell you what the hell to do. What could be easier? And once again, it saves you the trouble having to think for yourself. Who wants that hassle? Okay, let me start off with, as I wade into this topic a little bit, let me start off with a quote from one of my favorite spiritualists, Ram Dass. He said, as long as you have certain desires about how it ought to be, you can't see how it is. So the physical world, the world of objects and matter, is made up of nothing but information and energy vibrating at different frequencies. That's actually a scientific fact. That's not just my opinion. We can't see the world as such because it's vibrating far too fast. So only chunks of this information registers. So for example, the computer screen, or the boring professor talking to you right now. Our brains and minds act as transducers, taking in the information and energy through the five senses, and then interpreting that information according to what we already believe to be there, according to our pre-existing beliefs. And there's gaps in what we see, just like watching a movie, which is really individual still frames and gaps strung together and played back so fast that our senses perceive a steady stream of information. Okay, for example, perhaps when you were a kid, you saw that thing where you had a pack of papers and you go, brrr, and it looks like it's animation. Okay, like there's characters moving around, when in fact it's nothing but a series of pages of still frames. Well, if you actually look at a movie, if this is real evident when you look at film strips, as they used to be called. You hold up the film strip, you see it's nothing but individual frames. Similarly, when you have your mobile phone and you take a video of something going on, you can take a still shot of anything within that video. Why? Because the video is nothing more than a fast collection of frame by frame events and what's going on. That's exactly how life operates. Life is nothing more than a collection of still frames, but they go by us so quickly that we think of it as continuous motion when in fact it's not. It's just still frames. I know, but it's true. Now, just like when you watch a film strip, there's gaps in the information, but it's going by so fast you don't see the gaps. It just appears to be one continuous stream of information. So what does this all mean? Well, it means that what we see is simply conditioned by what we already tend to believe about what we're about to see. There is no objective reality. There's only the subjective reality of how we perceive what's going on. Study after study has shown, for example, that all of us have difficulty recognizing individuals from other racial ethnic groups. And the phenomenon is even worse for people in a majority population group. So oftentimes you'll hear majority populations referring to a minority group and say, they all look alike. Really? Do you all look alike? Here's another example. 3/4 of all people eventually exonerated of crimes they did not commit had been convicted based on inaccurate eyewitness identification, according to the Innocence Project. Now, these eyewitnesses were not lying. They could have passed the lie detector test. That is what they thought they saw. It's just that what they saw was conditioned already by their pre-existing beliefs. So again, there is no objective reality out there. It is simply vibrations that are being interpreted according through your eyes, which go to an image in the back of your brain, which creates a picture. And that image is simply conditioned by what you already are predisposed to believe is going on out there. So let me go back to the original quote. Walter Lippmann said, "We do not first see, then define. We define first, then we see." Now what would you pay to take this course, huh? As another example of the social construction of reality, before it became politically inconvenient, Trump used to brag that he knew Russian President Vladimir Putin. Quote, he said, "I got to know him very well because we were both on 60 Minutes. We were stablemates," Trump said. He seemed to think that they knew each other very well solely because they appeared on taped segments of the same broadcast. But here's the thing. They had never actually met. So Trump believes the story and believes the story is more important than reality. Well, hasn't that been the whole Trump presidency? Anything that disagrees with him or any fact that disagrees with him is in fact not true. Therefore, the only truth is that which he already states. Everything to the contrary is fake news. It's brilliant. We construct realities in countless different ways. For example, in encountering others, conversation usually proceeds with small talk, meaning that little is at stake. Only when sufficient information has been exchanged to guide more substantial discussion does big talk begin. Okay, so what is topic A when it comes to small talk? Think about that. Could it be the weather? Yes, it could. Why the weather? Well, first of all, we can all relate to it. And second of all, it's not controversial. You don't lead off with, especially these days, well, actually, take that back. Some people do. But the idea is you don't lead off with, how about that Trump? What do you think about him? You know, that's why people say, don't discuss religion and politics, because it just gets people agitated and you're not going to have a nice conversation, perhaps. So you start off with the weather and you just kind of feel your way around through the rest of the conversation to see where people are at and what other subjects you might want to probe. You know, to give you an example, here's another one of Maynard's amazing anecdotes, and not a moment too soon, I'm sure. So one day I'm driving down the highway and I go by this empty lot, and there is a couple of card tables and there's a woman selling blueberries. Now, this gets back to, sometimes we'll ask the social work students, gee, why do you want to be a social worker? And more times than not, it's not a trick question or a test question. It's more like, just curious, why? What's your motivation? And more often than not, they'll say, well, you know, ever since I was a kid, everybody was telling me their problems. So I might as well, you know, make a buck out of it. Or actually something more idealistic than that, but you get the drift. And it's the same with me. It's like sometimes I think, did I just come out of a conference and forgot to take off my name tag that says Maynard, social worker? Do I have it emblazoned on my forehead? Because people out of the clear blue just start telling me their troubles. So that's exactly what happened. So the engine's running, I jump out of the car, I grab a couple of quarts of blueberries, and I'm about to get back in my car. And this woman says to me, you know, it all started when my son died. And she starts telling me all her troubles and going, what, why, who, what? Meanwhile, the entire time is I'm trying to shift it back to the weather, get back to small talk instead of the big talk that she initiated. So I'm saying things like, hey, nice day if it doesn't rain. The cows are up. Now, for you country folk, you know what I'm talking about. When the cows are up, it's a sign it's not going to rain. When the cows are down, it's a sign they're going to rain. See, they're already trying to get a dry spot. But keep that in mind for the future as you drive through the countryside and are looking around for signs of rain. No extra charge for that tidbit either. Okay. Um, I have heard this challenge when I mentioned this in class by a person who actually worked for a U.S. rep, and she said they're hip to this technique. But I'll come back to what I said to her then. Arlene Kaplan Daniels recalls that a strategy of women's organizations in the early 1970s was to jot a personal note on a type letter to a member of Congress. Well, why? Well, see, I know you would like to believe that when you write a member of Congress, whether it's your representative or your senator, that you're going to get a personal response. That's hilarious. Unless you're some big donor or some big name, that ain't going to happen. Now, you're going to get a form letter that makes it look like you're getting a response from that person, but actually it's just a form letter. And they'll say, thank you for your opinion on this particular topic. We are looking into it. We think this is a very serious topic as well, blah, 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 blah. Hey, you want more than that. You're thinking, listen, I'm the one who elected you, or maybe I didn't vote for you, but the point is you serve at the will of the people, your constituents. So I want a response. So how do you get a response? So they put a little sticky note on there, and you have something like, suppose you're writing to the representative, uh, Fred Be Good. And so you go down there, dear Fred, great seeing you at the social function last week. Hope you and the missus are doing well, but you put her name in. Okay, so here's the congressional staff, and they go, oh my gosh, it must be a personal friend of Fred's. I better move it on to Fred and let him go. Now Fred gets and he goes, I don't know who the hell this is, but he doesn't want to let on that he doesn't know who you are either. So he'll go, dear Maynard, good to see you two at the function. I hope you and your sig other are doing great too. That way you get a personal response. Now, the person who worked for the representative told me, oh, they're hip to this. And I said, oh, yeah. Well, how do you know it isn't a personal friend? You don't know all his personal friends. How would you know? Moving on. Next, and these are his initials, in case I'm not speaking clearly, W.I. Thomas. His theorem is situations that are defined as real become real in their consequences. Terms that are soft when shaped can have hard effects. His point is this: it doesn't matter what is real, it only matters that we think it's real, and therefore it will have a real impact, which gets back to how Trump's MO. It doesn't matter if it's real, it only matters that people think what he's saying is true because it'll have a real impact. Okay, so let me give you my classic example of this. One of the courses I teach in social work is community organizing, which is how to organize people to take action on issues. And the so-called father of community organizing is a guy named Saul Alinsky. Now, Saul Alinsky is a white Jew, and I mentioned that was a white Jew, and I mentioned this because white nationalist groups like the Ku Klux Klan historically have hated Jews and blacks. They actually think that the Jews are anti-government and are behind the scenes and are using blacks as pawns, and it's all craziness, but nevertheless, this is their belief system. So the Ku Klux Klan actually invites him, Saul Alinsky, to come speak. Now, his thinking is, okay, so they're trying to show, see, we're not down on Jews. We're bringing a prominent Jew in here to speak. See, we're cool. Okay, so he's sitting there on the dais, and he's preceded in speaking by the Grand High Cyclops Wizard, or whatever the head of the Klan is called. So he gets up, talks, sits down, and so now it's Saul Alinsky's time. So Saul Alinsky gets up there, and usually what a speaker does is he or she tries to warm up the audience first with a few jokes, and then gets into the meat of what he or she wants to talk about. Not Alinsky. That wasn't the way he operated. He gets up there and he starts off and he's addressing the Klan. He says, I want to start off by telling you're all a bunch of hypocrites. That's right. You know why you're hypocrites? Because in preparation for the speaking engagement, I did a genealogical study on your Grand High Cyclops Wizard sitting over there. And get this, he's half black. That's right. He's half black. So you hypocrites are all down on black people, and your own leader is half black, and you don't even realize it. Well, he's going on and describing what he found about the leader. and none of it is true. He's making the whole thing up just to mess with him. Now, nevertheless, as he's speaking, they're all looking at the grand high Cyclops wizard, and what's happening is his skin's getting darker, his hair is getting kinkier, his lips and nose are getting fuller, and by the time he's done talking, they're convinced this guy's a black man, and none of it's true. Well, the upshot of it is, within a couple of months, he was forced to resign from the Ku Klux Klan, and then, even more shockingly, about 6 months later, he committed suicide. So people confronted Alinsky about this and said, if you had known that what you said that day, even though it wasn't true, would result in this man committing suicide, would you still have done it? He went, yeah, the guy, they're evil. They's evil. Okay. W.I. Thomas wrote, this is in 1923, he said, there is always a rivalry between the spontaneous definitions of a situation made by the member of the organized society and the definitions that society has provided for him. To give you another illustration of the power of language to define reality, the term homophobe literally means fear of sameness. As a label applied to those who direct hostility toward gays, the political character of the term defines as abnormal not homosexuality, but those who are hostile toward it. The term also transforms attitudes toward sexuality from a moral issue of right and wrong to a psychological issue of sickness and health. Other terms that spin reality in different ways. The terms elderly versus elders. So in traditional societies, elders were the venerated people of wisdom who passed down their traditions, and they're all looked up to by the other people in society. Now in industrial and post-industrial societies, we use the term elderly, which is come to connote a far less privileged status. The term ladies versus women. Handicapped children versus exceptional children. Are you taking a remedial course? Are you taking a remedial course, you dope? No, it's a refresher course. Ah. Are you from some primitive culture? Non-literate. Are you unemployed? No, I'm simply between jobs. Are you from a broken family? A one-parent household. Are you a slut or a skank? No, merely sexually active. Are you an anesthesiologist? No, I'm a professor. Now let me return to a moment for that term slut and skank, which one time in front of my social work students, I said, slut, skank, they're interchangeable. And the students immediately launched into a 10-minute debate among themselves while I stood there going, control in a classroom is so fragile. And they just kept arguing among themselves as to whether or not that's true. So anyway, after much discussion, they came up with the following conclusion. This is very illuminating for me. They said that there's a difference, that in fact, a skank is a dirty slut. So there you have it. Humpty Dumpty. And what other course other than maybe a children's book course do you get Humpty Dumpty quote? Humpty Dumpty said, when I use a word, it means just what I choose it to mean, nothing more nor less. The wisdom of Humpty Dumpty. Ethnomethodology is the study of the everyday common sense understandings that people have of the world, devised by Harold Garfinkel, who in the sensational 1960s went about town with his students to, OMG, break conventional rules and watch everyone's reaction. Please, people, don't do this. Follow the rules at all times. The last thing we want is people breaking rules. My gosh. Well, you know, I enjoy doing this too. I mean, some of the stuff they did was kind of interesting because it actually videotaped what was going on at that time, video record. And so, I should say it was actually videotaped. So for example, there's sort of an understood distance people keep between each other when they're talking. at least 6 feet these days. But prior to that, and it's culturally specific and it's also gender specific. But anyway, and so what they do is they would have, just some innocent people staying there, and then they would have the person working with them continue to encroach in that person's space while they were talking to see what the person would do. And the person would keep backing up, little things like that, just to break some conventional rules and watch people's reactions. What fun. Okay, well, I too enjoy such fun. So let me give you a little history behind this. Back before the have a nice day thing, there was the smiley face. Now, the smiley face appeared everywhere. And the smiley face, of course, was relational because there was also Mr. Ugg. And Mr. Ugg represented poison. So Mr. Ugg was like, but smiley face was, and people would have smiley face in their lunchbox and smiley face in their 3-ring notebook. We just couldn't get enough of the smiley face, which again, even though we pride ourselves on our individualism, once again, all of us sheep had to have the smiley face. Smiley face is fun. Well, that was replaced by have a nice day. Everybody says it. They put it on their phone, and everybody knows the standard response. Have a nice day. Well, you too. Once again, where the hell is our individuality? We all had to jump on that bandwagon too. Not this boy. Anyway, so I have lots of fun with it. So, for example, when I'm doing my clothes shopping at Walmart, here's this woman at the end of her 8-hour shift, stand in front of that cash register all day. She takes my crap, throws it in a plastic bag, slings it my way, and says, have a nice day. I can't let that go. So I'll say things like, are you having a nice day? Isn't every day, in fact, a nice day? What would make this a bad day? On and on, anything just to get a reaction out of them. I always chat it up with people who work in these capacities just to, like, hey, it sucks doing these jobs. And so when somebody come in and chat them up, they like it, take them out of the usual crap. So anyway, if you call my phone, people have it on their phones too. I can't answer the phone, but do have a nice day. Yeah. Okay, so if you actually call my private phone number, you will find, no, I'm not going to give it to you. You will find that my response is, I'm not answering this phone for any number of reasons. Pick one out that makes you feel better about this call, and maybe I'll get back to you. Who knows? And so people will pause and they'll go, well, I hope you're not doing this because you're screening the calls. That's exactly what I'm doing. Are you serious? But get the whole concept of have a nice day. What the hell is not a nice day? You're alive. You're living. You're here. It's a nice day. What constitutes a bad day? You know what's a bad day? It didn't go the way you thought it was going to go. Well, please, what day does? That's the whole point of it. It's such an adventure every day you wake up. But we don't see it that way at all. You go, I hope I have a good day. They all are, my friends. I'll give you another example. When I pull out, if you know the lay of the Cedar Crest land, you know that when you pull out of the Hamilton Street Boulevard exit, not the one at the light where the nursing building is, but the one without the light, it can be a real horror show because the traffic is flying by in both directions. But depending on the time of the day, I'll be pulling out and there's hardly any traffic and I could pull out at any point, but what's the fun in that? So I'll wait as the car is coming toward me from Ott Street. I'll wait and I'll wait and I'll continue to wait until I can see the whites of the person's eyes. And then I pull out and you can literally watch the adrenaline rush up and down this person's face and the horror of death go into that person's look, in that person's eyes as I drive off and go, have a nice day. Whoa. Just doing my bit to help other people have something to talk about when they get home that night. Reflecting on it, if I have a problem and I have a fault, which I probably don't, but if I do, it's that I just care too much. Okay, on page 147, you need to know about Goffman's dramaturgical analysis as the presentation of self. Dramaturgical analysis, think of the word drama. Hey, any of you, those of you who live in the res hall, you know all about drama. Mostly self-created. Anyway, it's the study of social, this could be like a reality show. Drama in the residence halls. What's going to happen today? Let's join the members of this res hall and find out. Dramaturgical analysis is the study of social interaction in terms of theatrical performance. Look at my performance. See, things have evolved. When I went to college, it was just dry lectures, you know, and they actually expected you to pay attention even though there was not even a change in their voice, and it was just crushingly boring, you know. But see, you want more. Now being a professor, it's the info entertainment business, and fortunately, I'm up to the challenge because every time I start one of these presentations, it's showtime. Well, the presentation of self is ways in which individuals in various settings try to create specific impressions in the minds of others. It's impression or image management. Well, that's what it's all about these days. It's all about image management. Look at what's going on in the political scene right now. It's all about image management. Goffman said, every day we prepare our faces to meet the faces that are prepared to meet us. Well, isn't it kind of true? What do when you stand in front of the mirror? You're mostly staring at your face and you're getting your face ready. Why? Because you're going to have face-to-face contact with other people. Then when you meet other people, you should at least acknowledge the fact that they put a lot of trouble in getting that face ready to meet yours. You know, hey, you did a real good job with your face today. How about mine? You know, so we can have this face-to-face contact. It's really nice, and I hope we can have face-to-face contact once again. Well, you know, the ancients well understood this because person and mask are derived from a single Latin root, persona. So they understood Goffman's insights that to be a person is to wear a mask. And, you know, it's sort of like we do that and we selectively allow people to get to know more and more about us. Why? Because I think it's because, hey, we all do selfish, regrettable things. And so we don't want people to realize, well, I too could be selfish and do regrettable things. Well, yeah, join the club. And so we don't want people to see that side of us. We want people to just see that side we want to project to them, because then they'll like us more. Now, if we didn't have such a demand to be liked or need to be liked, it wouldn't matter at all. So if you were self-loving, you wouldn't give a rat's ass whether other people liked you or not. It wouldn't be important. It wouldn't matter. Now there's something to ascend to. Self-love. Not narcissism, just self-love. Okay, I'm going to narrow this down for you. In the text on page 147 is an example of dramaturgical analysis. It's an event that takes place in the doctor's office. So it's on page 147. The example in the text is the doctor's office as an applied example of dramaturgical analysis. We also have nonverbal communication as well. For example, I'll point out right away, this does not mean we're number one. Now, if you're caught with it, that's what you tell people, of course, if they're insulted, but it doesn't mean we're number one. So nonverbal communication is also important. Oh, what else here? I want to get to something that's vitally important to this course. And because I can't gauge your reaction, whether or not you're laughing hysterically at what I think is humor or not, we got to get to this point on page 155, which is the social construction of humor, playing with reality. I'm not always sure you know what makes something funny. Now, people come up to me all the time and they say, Maynard, can we be as funny as you? Of course not. But you can be a little wittier than you are. And so you can go to my Cosmic School of Comedy and I'll give you all the tips on how to be funnier. See, because I actually study the comedic rules, what professional comedians talk about as to the keys to comedy. And they all use the same basic keys. For example, I'll give you a quick one right off the top. Never have more than 3 on a line is the rule. Okay, what does that mean? So that means if somebody says something funny and you tag onto it and everybody laughs at that, and then another person tags onto it and everybody laughs at that, and then a third person tags onto it and laughs at that, that's it. That's 3 in a line. I guarantee if a fourth person tries to tag on, it's played out and it won't be funny. So the rule is 3 on a line. Write that down. Okay. Dr. Robert Anthony said, he who laughs lasts. See, I know you thought I was going for he who laughs last best. That's not the point here. He who laughs lasts. What's he getting at? Because you will find, and I'm trying to get you to lighten up, don't take your life so seriously. Don't take life so seriously. This is Disney World. Or Disney World, as I refer it. You're supposed to be having a good time. And it all depends on how you look at it, and you would. So the fact that you're not having a good time is simply a result of how you are looking at your life and life situations. Relax, have fun, enjoy. Captain J.A. Hadfield said, the art of resting the mind and the power of dismissing from it all care and worry is probably one of the secrets of energy in our great men. It depletes your energy when you're stressed all the time. So to give you another example of, again, it's a medical doctor who said, he who laughs lasts. I wished I could remember exactly who it is. And every time I get to this point, I think maybe the next time I should look it up. But it was a person who became very famous by advocating positive thinking. But this was back in the 1940s, 1950s, and he was given the death sentence by the doctors. Said, it's terminal, there's nothing more we can do for you. And so settle your affairs, you only have a few weeks left. Well, he refused to accept this. And so what he did is he went out and rented every 8mm comedy he could find. Because at the time, that's how you would have these film strips, 8mm film strips. And so what did he do? He just would watch them every waking moment. He would just watch comedies, and within a few weeks, he spontaneously healed. Hence, he who laughs lasts. A key point is that humor is culturally universal but variable. In other words, what's funny in one culture may be not funny in another. That's always a key. For example, a lot of people in this country don't get me, but people, for example, in Tibet, I just kill there. And I'll give you an example. One time, this happens about every 8 years or so, we have the joy of having Tibetan Buddhist monks visit Cedar Crest. And what they do while they're here is they create a sand mandala. And it is painstaking to create this. And they're working on it the entire time other than breaking for meals. And they have prayers, they'll do a little performance and so forth. But anyway, at the conclusion of creating this fabulous sand mandala, they then carry it down to the creek and just dump it. And they're trying to point out, nothing lasts. Cling to nothing. Nothing lasts. Cling to nothing. Okay? Let it all go. Let it go. Don't attach yourself to anything. Well, I always like to hang around with them because you can learn lots of things from these people because they're pretty illuminated. And I thought I'd test out my humor. So I said to the head Tibetan monk, the monkey as it were, I said, what did the Tibetan Buddhist monk say to the hot dog vendor? And he said, I do not know. And I said, make me one with everything. And he said, oh, you very funny fellow, living legend. I go, it's so true. They don't get me here. All right. Another key point, and here's a key point, again, like three in a line. Once you understand this, you can construct your own jokes. Another key point, humor is based in the contrast of two incongruous realities, where conventional reality is flaunted with unconventional reality. So when you don't respond with, have a nice day, you too, and you come up with something other than that, it has the potential to have fun because people are expecting one response, you see, but you come up with another. Get it? That's the key to humor. The expected response does not come forward. Instead, something else does. That's why Harold Garfinkel's Breaking the Rules thing was so much fun. If you watch, as I do, the Three Stooges movies, a common theme in all the Three Stooges movies is that they would eventually somehow get invited to some rich person's affair and they'd end up having a pie fight and throwing food at each other and just flaunting high society right in their face. And so, hey, it's fun because high society doesn't enjoy that kind of thing until they're actually throwing food with them. Okay, so I'm going to give you a test joke right now, and you're going to tell me, based on this principle of two incongruous realities, why is this allegedly funny? I'm covering my ass on this joke. Groucho Marx said, I worked myself up from nothing to a state of extreme poverty. Okay, analyze that joke. Why is that supposedly funny? Could it be he said, I worked myself up from nothing, and you're thinking to a state of extreme wealth, but instead he says a state of extreme poverty. Get it? Okay, so now you can construct your own joke. So by the time I see you the next time, construct a joke, see if it works based on these principles. I got a couple more for you. My wife and I have no secrets from one another, at least none that she knows of. What do you get when you cross a mafia member with a sociologist? An offer you can't understand. Well, some years ago, I had the honor of delivering the opening convocation speech to the faculty and invited guests. And I came across this Woody Allen line. Woody Allen was a comedian. I guess I should start prefacing that when I quote these guys, but he's a comedian. Maybe I'll get more laughs that way. Anyway, so I use this line figuring, man, I'm going to open up with this and people are going to just be screaming laughing. So I start off with this direct quote from Woody Allen. He said, more than any time in history, mankind faces a crossroads. One path leads to despair and utter hopelessness. The other path to total extinction. Let us hope we have the wisdom to choose wisely. Nothing. I got nothing. The only people laughing were my friends in the first couple of rows going, well, here he is bombing again. Instead of a classroom with 50, he's now bombing in front of 500 people. Well, laughing at one's own joke is considered rather rude or odd because there's no punch at all. Listen, the way I look at it, if I don't laugh at my jokes, nobody will. So at least I'm consoled with the fact that somebody thought it was funny, even if it was just me. There's an old expression, you can pretend to be serious, but you cannot pretend to be witty. Indeed. Now, here's another example. To get a joke, the audience, the jokees, so to speak, must understand the realities well enough to perceive their incongruity. So you'll notice so far in this course, when I'm not sure if you get the joke, I start trying to explain it. See, you have to Google that to see that this means, and then you'll see that the joke is because, anyway, I also get this all the time. Actually, I really do. People say, Maynard, you're so quick. How do you come back with these You're so fast. How do you come back with them? Folks, I'll tell you my secret. They're all stored in the comedy vault. That's correct. I have 100 lines all set up in there, and I'm just waiting for the setup line. You know, I got the punchline. You got to give me the setup line. I'll give you an example. I love a lot of the Groucho Marx lines because they're just so, a lot of them are puns and they're just so hilariously stupid. And so if somebody goes, pardon me, I'll say, I can't pardon you, only the governor can. I can't stop myself. It's just going to come out as fast as you're saying it because I get the setup line. Now, I will confess to you all that there are times in which I just don't have the patience. And this is shameful. I'll be the first to admit it, where I try to engineer you to say the setup line so I can jump in with the punchline, such as my desperation to be funny and to be liked. Anyway, I came across a Groucho Marx line one time that I thought was so hilariously stupid. I was prepared to wait for 100 lifetimes if necessary, 1,000 lifetimes if necessary, till finally somebody said the proper setup line. But actually, it happened in this lifetime. Want to hear the story? I'm sure you do. Okay, so along with 3 friends, I was at this bar called Snooki's, and Snooki's took on a jungle theme, and it was the same old swill, but it was sold in a jungle way. So, for example, a drink could be called the Congo Cooler or something like that. Yeah, and anywhere else it'd be called something else, but it's called. And every one of the drinks had the little parasol, which I thoroughly enjoy in my foo-foo drinks. And in this particular place, it had, each drink had a little plastic stick, an African animal. Okay, so I'm sitting across from this woman, and she's messing around with this cheap little African animal on a stick as she's sipping her foo-foo drink. And it's an elephant. And as she's messing around with it, it's starting to fall apart. And she says, are you ready for this? She says, these tusks are loose. That's my setup line. Like, how often do you hear that in everyday normal discourse? These tusks are loose. Unless you're hanging around with animal poachers, never, and specifically elephant poachers, you will never hear that. And she says it. Okay, well, I am just sitting there in stunned amazement. And the best way to describe it is everything started happening frame by frame. If you've ever been in an auto accident, which I have been too, you can recollect every frame by frame of that sequence. Well, that's what's happening now. And it's like she's saying, these tusks are loose. Meanwhile, as she's saying this, in my brain, the Hallelujah chorus is singing, Hallelujah, 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 ha, ha, ha. Fireworks are going off. I'm thinking, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, this is the greatest moment in my life. She actually said the setup line. Well, I'm trying to drink in every nanosecond of this moment. And finally, I can't control myself any longer. And I blurt out the response line, which, of course, in Alabama, the tusks are looser. I'm laughing so hard, I fell on the freaking floor. Tears are squirting out of my eyes. Finally, I regain my composure. I climb back up to the chair and I look around, everybody's sitting here like this. And I'm going, see, she said, these tusks are loose. And then I responded with, in Alabama, the Tuscaloosa. See, that's a city in Alabama. You say, yeah, we get it, Maynard. It's not funny. Whew. That was harsh. Well, for the exam, you need to know on page 157 the functions of humor and also humor and conflict. So you need to know the functions of humor and conflict. Humor is also grounded in a culture, which is why ethnic comics have been common in our society. Now, this gets back to, for those of you who are Seinfeld fans, you may recall there was a dentist who liked to tell Jewish jokes, but didn't want to be accused of being anti-Semitic, so he converted to Judaism just so he could tell Jewish jokes. So that way it's okay. So ethnic and racial tensions, however, typically preclude a person of another category using the same humor. So one time I was watching a black comedian. He was joking how confusing black kids' names must be to whites because he said they sound like they were taken from a medicine cabinet. So he goes, Banaka, come over here and bring the twins, Vicene and Murray. Now, if a white comedian told that same joke, would the person be accused of being racist? You know, personally, I really like the originality of many African American names. Like, look at white people. We got some exciting names like John and Joe and Sally. And oh man, that's really riveting. But you have African American names like there's a football player named Noshawn. His father's name is Knowledge. His mother's name is Shona. And so they put them together. Uh, you have there's Debrickashaw is another football player. You have Ladasha, which is actually La, a dash, and an A. This is awesome, folks. This is what I'm talking about, individualism. Mark Twain said, clothes make the man. Therefore, naked people have little or no influence in society. Okay. Because humor involves playing with reality, it has an affinity with mental illness. Stereotypically, crazy people are often portrayed laughing. In fact, hospitals for the insane have long been called funny farms. There's also sick jokes. Did you know that when you shoot a mime, you have to use a silencer? If you didn't get that joke, Google the word mime. I got one last one. Why does New Jersey have so much industrial waste while Washington, D.C. has so many lawyers? New Jersey got first choice. You know, I told that joke in class one time, and later on that night, I get an email from a non-traditional age student there who's offended by the joke because her mother's a lawyer. It's like, please give me a break. You think your mother never heard lawyer jokes before? Lighten up. Well, folks, that's all I got for today with chapter 6. So I want you to all Wang Chung tonight. And if you don't get that song, if you don't get that, that's words to a song. You must have heard everybody Wang Chung tonight. And get this, the name of the band was Wang Chung. See ya. Bye.